This program is brought to you by the Koochiching Area Prevention and Education Coalition. CAPE exists to reduce youth and young adult alcohol and other drug use by promoting safe and healthy choices among all community members.
Well, welcome back to Coach's Corner as we're back at the Bemidji High School Gymnasium, and I'm joined by George Frake and Jerry Cleveland. And Jerry, I suppose I could try to introduce you, but why don't you just introduce yourself? Everybody knows George, so why don't you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Okay, yeah, well, I'm Jerry Cleveland. I'm been around wrestling for about 57 years, so I'm still hanging around tournaments today to see what's going on. I grew up in Staples, went to college in Bemidji, and I coached at Cass Lake for many years, and then a few other places. So.
Only 57 years.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty.
Start till I was a 12-year-old.
So if I do the math on that, and George is 70, that means you're 69. That means you guys are pretty good buds.
Yeah, he's older than I am.
Yeah, he always has that on you, doesn't that? We were talking, Jerry, before we went on the air, that you get to do some announcing of matches. You're a professional at this.
I really love it. I've just gotten out of.
Hang on one sec. There we go.
Okay, I just got out of coaching about a year ago completely. I volunteer coached a long time after I was done working for a living at it, but I got blessed. I got to work at the state tournament in Minnesota for a while. First I was running the clocks and the computers and the time on the get down by the mat side, and then they started doing this track wrestling, and they started needing announcers for all the mats. So I've been able to do that the last few years with the Class A state tournament, and that's been great. And now I got the call to go down to the Clash down in Rochester, that big national duels they have down there, and do some announcing. So it's just right up my alley to talk about wrestling.
Well, and that's one thing that I've never done. George and I have always said we would love to be able to go do wrestling and do it on the radio. And I would say maybe 15, 20 years ago, I'm traveling across western Minnesota to, I don't know where I was even going, and I'm flipping through the radio stations, and all of a sudden I come on this thing and it's a guy talking, and I'm like, What's he talking about? Well, it was the Roseau radio station, and they were at a wrestling, and they were talking about wrestling, and I'm like, I guess I never would have thought that you could make wrestling work on the radio, but it does work.
It does work very well, and it helps when you have somebody that kind of knows a little about what they're doing out there. But you can give them updates and scores and play-by-play actually sometimes. It works really fun. I do a lot of research for this stuff. You go on, so when a kid comes out, you can talk about their record and what they did in previous years and where their family came from. So it's really fun. Guys that talk like George and yourself, I'm sure would enjoy it.
Yeah,
I would like doing football.
Yeah,
same thing, George.
I would find it a challenge. I think that's the thing. I always say that people ask me what's the toughest thing you ever did. I did a tug of war. That was tough. That, especially when you can only be on one side of a river, where they were doing the tug of war, the USA versus Canada. It was very, very difficult. So I would find the wrestling a challenge. George, tell us what you know about Jerry, because he told us a little bit. But
Jerry wrestled for another legend. That's Don Dravis, and Don Dravis is a Hall of Fame wrestling coach, and really one of the real foundations of wrestling in Minnesota, not only the Staples area. Jerry graduated in 1967. He slipped over to Itasca for a couple of years, and all of a sudden, 1968, volunteered for the draft and wound up in Vietnam and served a tour and a half over there, and then came home and started building his life back up together again. And he came to Bemidji. He was telling me how he got into the Bemidji school. Well, I talked to a guy a year or so ago that refereed one of his matches, and he said, and this is what I'm going to ask Jerry about it. He would say it was really difficult match because you didn't know what was going to happen or when it was going to happen. Was this a reflection of Don Dravis' style, or was this just a reflection of yours?
I think it was a combination. Everything.
I'm going to cut you off because we're going to take a break for the national anthem, and we're going to come back with more because we got to make sure we don't make anybody upset here this morning. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with more here from Bemidji High School. You're listening to Coach's Corner, live on K104 and online at rjbroadcasting.com. All right, welcome back to Coach's Corner here from Bemidji High School, and you might be saying, why the national anthem? Well, we're ready to get to wrestling. Wrestling starts at 9:30, and so right before we went on to commercial, George, you had just asked Jerry about, say the question again, so in case somebody just joined us.
Well, this happened a year or so ago, and I was talking to one of the former Bemidji coaches, a guy named Jeff Nelson, who refereed some of Jerry's matches, and he said, you know, the matches, you didn't know where it was going to end, but you know it was going to be 15-12 or 15-13. There was going to be scoring, and you know, and I there are some wrestlers that just kind of go for the wall, go for the whole thing right from the get-go. And my question is that what you picked up, or is that what Coach Dravis did for you?
Well, I think it was a combination of Dravis and just my own attitude about it. Don always said that we need to be prepared to go 6 full minutes and sometimes more than that. So Dravis teams were in great condition, and I kind of followed that when I wrestled myself and when I coached later on. But I think I was a little unorthodox. I didn't have a lot of, you know, moves that are, you know, they say, oh wow, that was really a fancy move. But I was a brawler, and we would just go hard. So yeah, I did have a lot of matches that were in double figures points. And I think 27-28 is probably the most that I got. But I did that, you know, because I just once you get the motor running, you got to go. You know, so that was always fun. But that was just the style that I had.
So, as coaches, and I'm asking both you guys this question, do you have to kind of look at the kids and say, this kid's a 27, you know, 15, 13 kind of guy, or this kid's a 3-2 kind of guy, and you got to coach them up that way?
Oh, I think you do. Some kids are very, you know, you're going to get your 2 points and you can control things and ride them out and get your 1 point. You know, that kind of wrestling drives me crazy. It did as a wrestler and as a coach. I wanted to open it up, and you know, Dre was a pinner. You know, you always win by a pin, you know, no matter what the score is. So I just always felt I had to keep going hard and get all that I could.
Well, as I recall, Don Dravis was also the Prince of the Cradle.
Yeah, that's right.
And you threw cradles from every direction known. And I would ask Coach Dravis, what do you do different than everybody else? He says, well, nothing really. Well, I come to find when you watch it, you threw cradles from the feet, you threw cradles from the mat, you threw cradles, you know, cross-face cradles, bow and arrow cradles. There was several different varieties, and all the kids were very good at it.
That's right, and he's got many, many, many of his former wrestlers now coaching successfully in Minnesota and all over the place. And I tell you, every place they go, they're bringing the cradle with them.
Yes, they are.
Okay, I was thinking about this morning. I'm like, okay, what's one question that I can ask him? So here's the question that I've been thinking about. What's maybe the best match or best duel that sticks out in your brain? You've had 57 years. George, you've had 50 plus years. Is there one duel, whether it be high school, maybe one you were in, a match you were in, what one kind of sticks out in your brain and you're like, if somebody said wrestling, this is the match you think of?
Wow, that's really tough because there's an awful lot of them go through my head. But I guess George and I were talking here a little bit earlier about that, and probably the biggest match of my life was the first time I had a team qualify for the state tournament. We wrestled Detroit Lakes, who's here today wrestling, you know, and they were a little bigger than us. We hadn't seen them at all during the year. The only scouting reports I had was from probably calling Don Dravis down at Staples or somebody saying, what can you tell me about these guys, you know? And we went in there thinking, boy, this is going to be a tough one, and we ended up blowing them out, you know, 50-something to 18 or whatever it was. And I'll never forget that because the kids went out there and wrestled. You know, we were pinning and getting, you know, big points. I never had to worry about a 2-to-1 match, and that's the way the kids so I guess I remember that. That was a highlight. And the only other one was when my last year of coaching at Cass Lake, we did take third in the state, and winning that third place match was a big deal.
Yeah.
Those are the ones you remember.
Yeah, you went out with a win.
Yes, I did.
You didn't win out. Not many coaches get to say that.
Yeah.
How about for you, George?
Well, when we talk about guys you coach against, Jerry, the Johnson brothers, Skip Nayland, Rick Lee, for of all people, all these guys, when you went and wrestled them, you were prepared. You did not sleep well the night before, and you went after these guys a lot. I guess the one that stands out is Virginia beat us 4 times one year, and we went down the last match of the year on live TV, Parents' Night, and we went down there, and my boys cut cut the weight because we were getting close to region, and we went in that gym and just waxed them. And we walked out, and people say, "Oh, I'm just shocked at this." I wasn't. I knew what I had to prepare, and I generally use the coaches as the standards there. I mean, if I was going to go against Cass Lake, I knew that boy, we better be watching for cradles all over the place. And then they hooked up with Steve
Bechtel?
Steve Bechtel and Black Duck, and he was from St. John's, a math teacher from St. John's, and I don't know where he got his wrestling, but it was smooth and it was tight all the time, and these guys partnered up. Well, then you know that you got a tough go that day.
So everybody might be wondering, we mentioned we're at the Rick Lee Wrestling Invitational Tournament here. So who wants to take the lead here and tell everybody about Rick Lee?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about that other than that it's been going on for a number of years, and they stopped it for a few years, and then they rejuvenated again a year or two ago. But Rick Lee was a state champion wrestler for Bemidji, as was his brother Jerry several years ago, back in our time. And they lost him to cancer, I believe, a few years back.
Yes, he did. He had a brain tumor.
He just they carry on the tournament in his honor because he was traditionally just a real go-getter. He was a great coach of this team after he wrestled here himself in high school, and it's been a great tournament for a number of years.
Well, I'll tell the story about Rick Lee. They came up to International Falls. We had a very good duel, and at 106 pounds, I had a good kid, but he grabbed the side of the face mask and flipped the kid down and put him on his back. At the end of the match, Rick come over and he says, "You cheated." No, I'm not sure. And he showed us the film. Yeah, indeed he had. And he says, "But that's not why I'm complaining." Why? He says, "There were no brownies. I come up 100 miles for some brownies, and the brownies weren't there." Well, the next week we were going down for a tournament, and I had my wife make a full batch of brownies for Rick. And I go down, and Rick is he's running the seating tournaments, the seating meeting. And I give him this box of brownies, and he says, "This is not going to help you one bit." And then he says to the other ones, "Anybody touches these brownies, I'm going to smack them in the head." And walked out. He did not share those brownies, but he didn't give me a break on the seat either. So but Rick was really a terrific guy, and you really couldn't find a friendlier, more compassionate, great wrestling coach. He was something else.
The wrestling has begun here. We can maybe hear the cheering. If you're listening at home, you can hear the cheering in the background. George, 2 years ago when we came down and did this Coach's Corner show, we did it from over at the Sanford Center. Thank you. And they had 10 mats out there, and things were kind of crazy and big thing here. Today we're at the high school gymnasium because there's actually hockey going on this weekend. So just 6 mats, but I assume both you guys, well, I know, George, you were here, and I assume, Jerry, you were here yesterday watching. What did you guys see yesterday in the wrestling, in the matches yesterday?
Well, I tell you what, and I knew that coming in. Perham had a real good team last year. They were region champions going in the state tournament. Lost, I don't know, I think they took 3rd or 4th down there. But I knew that they were going to be solid. I had no idea how solid. And but Perham was a very impressive team yesterday.
Jerry, how about for you?
Yeah, I agree. I've seen Perham a couple times down. They are pretty impressive. Detroit Lakes also has great balance, and they're actually going to meet head-to-head here to get out of their section eventually. So, and we'll see them today get after it. So there'll be some good wrestling going on. Brainerd has come on really strong. I knew they had some really good quality kids. I didn't know they had team balance like they did. They won some big matches yesterday. So good tournament.
Is there one kid that kind of stuck out at any weight yesterday? Was there one kid that kind of stuck out? You watched him and you went, when I go back tomorrow, I'm going to make sure I watch his match.
Well, the Perham 195-pounder, coach's kid, Mosier, is pretty amazing. He's a senior, I believe, this year, and he's amazing. But there's another one I want. Bemidji's got a little guy, an 8th grader by the name of Seth Newby, who made it to the state last year as a 7th grader when he cut down to 106. And he wrestled state runner-up yesterday at 120. He had to cut down to 120 because he grew this year some. And Seth wrestled him and beat him by about 6 points in that match. So there's a guy to watch for. So we got a senior going out that's really everybody's noticing, and with 8th grader coming up that everybody's noticing. So those are the two I really watched yesterday.
How about you, George?
Well, I tell you, I watched it again. The Bemidji team, And they have a 195-pounder. His name is Moen. Pete Moen. And he, if he hooks up with Mosier, that is going to be a battle royal. These guys are just chunks. And you notice when you have people in that room that are like that, you try to avoid them as a coach because there's an injury factor. And when Moen walked off the mat, he had a cut eye and he had a nasty look in his eye, and I thought, oh boy, he is going to be tough to contend with on Saturday.
Absolutely. I don't want to neglect Isaiah Thomas from Detroit Lakes, returning state champion from last year, who's very, very good. And he wrestled place winner from Black Duck Castle Lake Bena, Ian Frenzel, yesterday and pinned him. Last time they wrestled, Frenzel beat him 4-3 at the Big Bear. And the time before that, he'd beat Frenzel 4-2 at the Foster tournament. So they've met 3 times this year. But Thomas is exceptional as well.
Very good. I'm gonna get you guys to think about this question, and then we're gonna take a break and we're gonna come back with more. But here's gonna be the question that we're gonna come back and start with. What weight class do you enjoy watching the most? Overall, do you enjoy what weight number do you enjoy watching most? We're gonna take a break. We're gonna come back with more Coach's Corner. You're listening live from Bemidji High School, right here on K104 and online at rjbroadcasting.com. Oh, well, welcome back to Coach's Corner here as we come back. I'm joined by George Frake and Jerry Cleveland. And guys, we went to the break and I asked you the weight class that you most enjoy watching. So you've had about 2 minutes to think about it. George, I'm going to start with you. What weight class do you enjoy watching the most?
Well, I'll tell you, if you take a real solid cut-down 155-pounder, they have the speed, they have incredible strength, and people don't realize just how powerful a 155-pound kid can be. And that's kind of the middleweights that I really enjoy, just because of the speed. They have the quickness and the moves of the smaller weights, and they're big and strong like the bigger weights. That kind of gets me.
Jerry, how about for you?
I guess I have to be in agreement there. That 38, 45, 52-pound weight classes, you got your older kids, your senior kids, and they're still moving full speed ahead. Yeah. You get bigger kids, and they're very fun to watch, and they're very strong and talented, but the action isn't quite there the same, And the little guys, sometimes there's a lot of young ones out there. So I guess those middleweights, like George is saying, 45, 52.
So somebody asked me last week, we were talking about the NFL football games, and the Ravens and the Chargers got to the end of their game, and of course the Gophers were already on BTN wrestling against Rutgers. And I told them, I said, I didn't even watch the start of the Bears and the Eagles. They weren't even on the radar. I said, I got to watch about the last 6 matches of the Gophers versus Rutgers. And I said, my disappointment is that I didn't get to watch the 125s, the 133. By the time I got to watch it, it was up to the 165s already. Those 125s and those 133s at the college level are incredible. I almost feel like I missed out if I don't get to see those first couple matches, because you talk about the speed of the kids. But at that level, at the college level, do they have the kind of strength that you guys are talking about with the 155-pound kids and having that strength? Yeah,
remarkably enough, they do. And I've seen some. I had a 119-pounder. He's out there, Chad Hell, and he took 5th in the state. But at 119 pounds making weight, he was the toughest kid in my room. I mean, he was strong. He could do all kinds of things, and he never weighed more than 125 pounds all year. So, yeah, they can. And the ones that have the talent and work hard will develop that strength. There are no weak wrestlers. All wrestlers are strong. That's just kind of the way it goes. Otherwise, you're not wrestling anymore.
Is there one, I mean, you teach all your kids as a coach, you teach them all the moves, but is there one that you guys, when we talked about whatever, is there one move that you went and started a kid with when he first started walking out on the mat, or I should say he or she, when they walked right out onto the mat, what was the first thing, what was the main standby you're saying, we've got to have this move down? Jerry?
Well, George and I talked about this earlier before the broadcast here, but the cradle, Staples cradle, Don Dravis was famous for his cradle, which is a pinning position, of course, and it's very aggressive. You can score a lot of points there. You can get a lot of pins there. You can ride a guy out there. So that's something I think most of us that I really focused on. You got to be a pinner to be a winner. Sometimes you're going to get Sometimes you're going to get way behind, not be good on your takedowns, as somebody else is, and somebody else gets away from you or somebody else can ride you out. So you better be able to come through if you're behind as well. And the cradle would be the one that if I had to choose one move, that'd be it.
George? Well, I tell you, I went to a wrestling clinic a number of years ago, and I ran into Bobby Douglas, who was the coach at Iowa State, and he had out a great book, and we sat down, Dan Jinks and I, and picked his mind all evening. And when I walked away from there, I thought, you are a wrestler from your feet. You always like wrestling from the feet. You concentrate on takedowns, and things will go well for you. And I bought Bobby Douglas's program, hook, line, and sinker, and we got a lot of success for that. You bet we did cradles. You bet we did leg rides, because we run into those with our opponents all the time. But for us, we wanted to get the first takedown, and we wanted to get the last takedown. We were takedown teams.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I just have a funny story because, I grew up in Staples, and wrestling was new there when I started, and we had a very small wrestling room. And we didn't have we couldn't all stand up in there and go takedowns. We had to kind of do it in one group on, one group off type of deal. So we spent much more time on the mat working on our pinholds or getting out of the bottom. And I think that really influenced the way it is. Makes a lot of difference the way you wrestle.
Oh, on top of that, Don Dravis and Skip Nealon were both masters of the mat. And they knew more mat moves and more things to do on the mat than I certainly ever knew. So I had to take what I got. But boy, I'll tell you what, when you were going with those guys on the mat, you better not keep your head down. You better be moving.
You may remember the Mazzatelli brothers, Mike and Jim.
I do.
They were from Coleraine.
Yes.
They wrestled at Tasca and then went on to Drake and Northern Illinois. Well, I credit them with teaching me more about wrestling than I ever learned in my life, because they came back to Itasca and taught me how to use the legs.
Yes.
And that was my ticket. I mean, I just, that's how I got all my points and my pins. Just put the legs in and turn people over to that, and I'll never forget that. The Mazzatelli brothers, they were amazing.
So here's my question. As a non-wrestler, never tried it, never whatever, and for those people out there that are listening that will never try it and never will get the chance to, when you're out there wrestling, how do you play the difference between being offensive and defensive minded when you know that you might be on the edge and you're like, do I go offensive? Do I play defensive? Is it a feel for the kid? How do you train a kid to know when to go after it and when to say, I got to pull back and I'm maybe they've got the upper hand and I've got to be more defensive?
Wow. I can answer that real simply for myself. I've never been a defensive wrestler in my life. I
thought I might get that.
I get after it, and I want my kids to get after it, and I'd be screaming and hollering. We're not going to hang on to anybody. We're going to try to get them all the time. That's just my philosophy, and I don't know if it's right or not, but I couldn't even imagine trying to defend myself from getting pinned or something. I want to get them.
George, how about for you?
Well, I wrestled heavyweight, and I was probably about 210 or 215, and there were a lot of bigger guys, and so to say that I was guilty of stalling would be an underestimation. And I would clamp on now, where the rules would have it, I wouldn't make it through the first period before they start taking points. But when I got to the mat, and once I got him, and I knew that I had him, the only one way to finish this kid was get absolutely as aggressive as you could be, and at that point in time, I was a street fighter.
So let me add on to the question a little bit. So now you're down on the mat. You're in a spot where maybe you're like, I could take a chance, but maybe I shouldn't take a chance. Is there a point, even Jerry, even at that point, were you saying, nope, go, and if you get pinned?
I think my mindset is just to go.
He didn't even think about it.
I don't think I ever thought about it. I had to keep going.
Did you have kids who didn't feel the way that you do about it, and you had to kind of not beat it out of them, but get it out of them that, look, we don't want you to be defensive. We want you.
The only time that would come into play would be if it was their choice. They had to make a decision whether they're going to be top, bottom, or neutral in the last period. If I thought, well, you might be better off, getting on top and riding them out than trying to get out on the bottom when you're not. So yeah, that very rarely. But most of my kids, I think I'm very fortunate because I had the aggressive kids, or maybe they just reacted that way because I made them. I don't know.
It just seems to me that when I watch wrestling and I look at a guy who maybe is being who he's on the bottom, he's got a guy who's riding him, he's on top, and you're kind of going, do I try to do something crazy here? I mean, I watched the guy the other day, and he basically scissor kicked over the top. He was kind of tied up with him, and he scissor kicked over the top and landed behind him and took the guy down. Is that the kind of aggressiveness that you're talking about, Jerry?
Well, I don't want to put themselves in jeopardy. They gotta know they're still in control to be aggressive. But I don't want you to just start hanging on rather than looking for an opportunity to pin. You always want to look for an opportunity to finish it off, but not be careless. That was where the difference would come in. Don't do anything stupid.
Okay.
Well, and like you're talking about, the legs are flying and they're doing all the rest of that. I know that he trained his kids to be able to do that, and so did I. Back flips and forward flips, and to try to have have a sense of gravity no matter what position you were in, some balance, and know where you're at. And boy, I'll tell you, some of these guys flipping their legs around, I don't know how they do it, but they're very good at it.
Jerry, you've watched a lot of wrestling. We were talking about how many meets you've already been to this year. You talked about the kids who are here. Give me one kid out there that I should put on my radar going towards the state tournament, that if I were to go down there on Saturday and I'm looking at the individuals, I got to go watch this kid wrestle.
Well, I think we've mentioned there's Werner kid from Perham and the Moser kid from Perham and Isaiah Thomas from Detroit Lakes. Those are three, top-notch kids. Really good ones.
Well, you keep in mind when you go down to that state tournament, there are no fish.
Yeah.
These guys are all good, and you don't know where it's gonna wind up, but you're not going to find a weak opponent. They don't come there.
And Greenbush has a couple of kids that are fun to watch too. Coach's kids, I forget his name. But they got a couple of really, and they've got a youngster about a 220-pounder that's a sophomore who's already a two-time state placement. He was an 8th grade runner-up in the state, I think, at 220, the big kid. And he's only a sophomore. It's going to be his 3rd state tournament already. I like to watch guys like that, too, to see when he's going to get to the top of that podium.
Yeah.
Bakura, I think his name is, yeah.
A kid like that's young, that gets that much success as an 8th grader, I assume there's been kids who have reached that point, and then all of a sudden the pressure maybe of getting back to there gets to be too tough, or do most wrestlers not go through that?
I think most of them keep right on going when they get an early start like that. You look at guys like Mooney, who's officiating here today, was about a 4-time state champ for Greenbush. He just kept on getting better every year. And we got a few of them, yes.
George,
but it's a grind.
George, it looked like you were going to add something to that thought about kids progressing on.
No, but we were talking about Seth Newby and some of the rest of these. We've seen 7th graders that are competing against juniors and seniors and doing well. That's really hard to do because just in the age and the physiology of their bodies. But they do pop up, and I'm thinking Dave Caligiuri from Hibbing and Johnny Hackala. These guys were all in the state tournament like Jerry in the 7th grade. Now, you don't know what you're going to run into there, and it can be tough.
Jerry, I appreciate you coming on here this morning. I appreciated the stories and the candor, and I'm sure you guys are itching to get out there as the wrestling is already started, and you guys can get out there and get a chance to watch.
I appreciate you doing this very much. Thank you. It's always good to talk wrestling with you guys.
Hey,
I appreciate that very much.
As an advocate of wrestler, he's the best.
Jerry Cleveland and George Frake joining me here. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we will talk about what happened in this past week, and we'll talk about what's coming up. You're listening to Coach's Corner, live from Bemidji High School, right here on K104 and online at rjbroadcasting.com. Welcome back to Coach's Corner for our final segment. Again, want to thank Jerry Cleveland for coming on. George, I have to say, he's a class act. He's good stuff.
Oh, he really is. If you want to talk about all the wrestling characters around, he gets to ride the big bus, and and he's been around for a long time and knows a lot about wrestling.
You mentioned the Skip Nayland coming up in 2 weekends.
The 26th of January, and I'm going to be getting up early in the morning and scooting down there. I'm generally there by the national anthem time at 10, but there'll be some pretty good wrestling, and our friend Noah Mathis is going to be there, and so. It'll be fun to watch him wrestle and just kind of hang around the gym.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the week that was. Let's go back to last Saturday. The Bronco boys hockey team had to rally back from a 2-0 deficit. They took a 3-2 lead in the second period against North Shore. The Storm then tied it in the third to force overtime, and then what a finish to the hockey game. You go to overtime. Simon Palm takes a minor penalty, a major penalty to Travis Kaler. Palm comes out of the penalty box in overtime. Right there's the puck off the stick of Joe Glowak, who's I was told maybe just clearing the puck out of the zone, and Palm comes out of the penalty box, breakaway comes in, ends the game, and the Broncos win by a final score of 4-3. The Bronco girls hockey team was down at Duluth Marshall last Saturday. They lose by a final score of 4-0. Grace Wegner was outstanding in goal despite the loss. She saved 34 shots out of the 38 that she faced. The Fort Frances girls hockey team was in Thunder Bay last week. They went 1-2-1 in that tournament. The Muskie boys were up in Winnipeg as they ended up getting a loss there to Sturgeon Heights by a score of 6-1 as Austin Armstrong had the only goal for the Muskies. The Fort Frances Lakers, they lost to Dryden 6-1 as the Lakers came back into play after their holiday break. Jaden Ness scored the only goal for the Fort. On Sunday, the Elks did their free throw shooting competition. Let's run down the winners for you. In the 8 and 9-year-olds boys, Carson Line took first place. Second place to Michael Sobkowitz. 8 and 9-year-old girls, Claire Zika took first. Paige Norman took second. 10 and 11-year-old boys, Landon Budrus took first. Ashton Lennox took second for the 10 and 11-year-old boys. And the 10 and 11-year-old girls, Piper Tomzak first place. And Chesney, and I hope I'm saying that right, Skrine took second place. There were no competitors in the 12 and 13-year-old boy range, not a competitor, not even one to take first or second place. And then in the 12 and 13-year-old girls, Kelby Anderson first place and Grace Swenson second place. On Monday, the Bronco girls basketball team lost to MIB by a score of 96-16. Delilah Budrus had 10 points for the Broncos. The LBF girls went on the road and lost to Ely 69-36. Emily Fairchild had 12 points to lead the way for the Vikings. And the Bronco boys basketball team led Lake of the Woods 66-28 at the break on their way to an 85-41 win. Armando Barrios led 4 players in double figures with 18 points. Jay Saline had 17, Riley Larson 13, and Max Olson 11. On Tuesday, the Bronco girls hockey team got a pair of goals from Morgan Rasmussen, but it wasn't enough as Bemidji won by a score of 3-2. The Bronco boys hockey team got the first goal of the game just about 3 minutes in off the stick of Justin Besch, but then it was all Blue Devils after that as Virginia scored 6 straight on their way to an 8-2 win. Kian Gonzalez had the other goal for the Broncos. The Little Fork Big Falls Viking boys basketball team went on the road. They lost to LaPorte by a score of 63-49. The Fort Frances girls hockey team lost on home ice to Dryden by a score of 7-1. The Fort Frances boys hockey team went on the road. They got a 7-3 win at Red Lake. 7 different players scored in that hockey game. Fort Frances boys were at home, were on the road in Kenora, and they beat Beaver Brae 95-51 as Kobe Ward had 26 points, and the Muskie girls volleyball team won in 4 sets. On Wednesday, Tori Torreseva finished 3rd place in the senior girls event at the Nordic skiing competition in Kenora for the Fort Frances Muskies, and the Rainy River women's basketball team beat Fond du Lac 131-38. Yeah, that's not a typo, folks. 131-38. Featra Shaw and Deja Monroe each had 36 points in the win for the Voyagers. The Voyagers only had 7 players, so you got to keep some of them out there, folks. It's just one of those things, the way it goes. On Thursday, the Bronco girls basketball team trailed Eveleth Gilbert by 2 points at the half as they ended up losing to Eveleth 53-44. Grace Gilbert 16 points. Chloe Sullivan had 11. The Little Fork Big Falls Viking girls basketball team went on the road and got a nice 58-48 win at Deer River, a team that they had lost to earlier in the season. Destiny Pekarski led the way with 19 points. Emily Fairchild had 17. And a game that was heard on KGHS 12:30 a.m. and 95.3 FM on Thursday night. Mike Bolstead and myself were over at the Duke watching the Muskie girls hockey team as they took on first place St. Thomas Aquinas. It was just a dandy hockey game. It had a little bit of everything. It even had some punches thrown, some cross-checking, some stuff after the whistle, some things that you don't always see in a girls hockey game. The visitors scored on the power play late in the first period to take a 1-0 lead. Izzy Taylor came down about halfway through the second period on a breakaway after a nice pass from Emily Kahn. She put it in the back of the net, made it 1-1, but St. Thomas Aquinas answered back with 2 goals before the end of the period to take a 3-1 lead. Going to the third period, The Muskies get a 5-minute power play in the second half of the third period. They got one goal from Jill Calder that was unassisted, but they couldn't get it any closer as they lose 3-2. Jersey Mason was in goal for the Muskies, and she played very, very well. Last night, what happened? The Bronco girls hockey team got a hat trick from Emma Erickson on their way to a 5-0 win over Park Rapids area. The Fort Francis boys hockey team split a pair of games. They beat John Taylor 10-1 yesterday morning. Lost in overtime last night, 3-2 to Oak Park. The Fort Francis girls volleyball teams in Kenora, they went 4-0 in the pool round. The Fort Francis boys basketball team is in Thunder Bay. They won a pair of games, and the Fort Francis Lakers lost in overtime to Dryden by a score of 4-3. What's going on as we go through this upcoming week? A very busy day today. As I mentioned, all the Fort Francis teams in their tournaments continuing on. The boys swimming and diving team is in Virginia for a noon invitational. The girls basketball team from International Falls is in Two Harbors for a 2:30 game against the Agates. That very well could decide possibly whether the Broncos get a home playoff game or don't get a home playoff game. I'm making that prediction nearly 7 or 8 weeks in advance. This is a biggie, folks. They need this hockey. They need to win this basketball game, and the girls hockey team is going to be at Prairie Center, which is, I'm going to try to get through these, Wadena Deer Creek, Browerville, Sauk Center, and somebody else. There's another school in there. That's who the Broncos are taking on this afternoon. And then the Rainy River men's and women's basketball teams are at home against Lake Superior at 1 and 3 o'clock. Tomorrow, the Fort Francis Curling Club hosts the Norwassa qualifier starting at 4 o'clock. They'll have matches that start at 4, I believe 6:30, and at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. So if you want to go watch some curling, the Fort Francis boys-girls teams will be taking in action starting right around 4 o'clock. So if you want to get over and watch that, the Fort Francis girls hockey team is in Sioux at Sioux North today for a 7:30 game, tomorrow for a 12:30 game. And that's what's going on there over the weekend. On Monday, the girls' basketball team will be down to take on ESCO. Remember, I mentioned ESCO earlier. They're number 1 in the QRF, so the Broncos will have their hands full there. And the Viking girls' basketball team will be at Big Fork. Doesn't probably get any bigger for the Vikings than when you play at Big Fork on Monday. On Tuesday, Mike Bolstead and myself will be down at Hoyt Lakes as the Bronco boys hockey team takes on Eveleth Gilbert. The boys' basketball team is at home against Eveleth Gilbert, and the Broncos swimming and diving team is in Eveleth to take on the... So all 3 boys teams are taking on Eveleth, and the only home one there is the boys basketball team. The Fort Francis girls hockey team is at Beaver Bray on Tuesday, and the Fort Francis girls volleyball teams and boys basketball teams will be hosting Dryden Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday night, the Lakers will be in Dryden for a 7:30 game up there. On Thursday, very busy day. Lots of sports in action, but we'll be at Bronco Arena to bring you Bronco girls hockey versus Cloquet. Cloquet ranked right at the top of the section, so the Broncos will have their hands full there. The boys basketball team is at home on Thursday night against Hibbing. The Fort Francis boys hockey and girls hockey teams will be in Dryden for games on Thursday night. The Fort Francis girls volleyball and boys basketball team will be at home against Beaver Bray on Thursday afternoon. The girls basketball team heads to Duluth-Denfeld for a 7:15 game, and both Viking basketball teams are in action. So the boys are at home against Nashua, Keewatin, and the girls are at Lake of the Woods. So if I count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams in action on Thursday night. Very busy Thursday night. Next Friday night, Will Heyer will bring you boys basketball on the air against the Mesabi East Giants. The girls hockey team will be at home against North Shore. The Lakers will be at home against Minnesota. The LBF boys basketball team will be at home against Big Fork, and the Rainy River men's and women's basketball teams will be at Itasca. On Saturday, of course, it's Icebox Days next weekend. We'll have the Freeze Your Gizzard Blizzard Run and all kinds of coverage starting on Thursday through Sunday with the Icebox Days. And but also on Saturday, the Fort Francis boys hockey team will be at home against Red Lake. Mike Molstead and myself will be over there to bring you the game on KGHS, 12:30 a.m. and 95.3 FM with the opening faceoff at 7:30. Next Saturday, the boys hockey team will be at Duluth-Denfeld for a 3 o'clock game. The boys swimming and diving team will be in Grand Rapids for the True Team Meet. The Lakers will be at home against Thief River Falls. The Rainy River basketball teams will be at home against Central Lakes. The Rainy River women's hockey team, after having about 4 weeks off, they will be at UW Stout. And the wrestlers are supposed to be at the Thief River Invitational next week. And Georgie driving over to Thief.
Well, you know, I did it just a couple of years ago and really had a great time. Thief River Falls, they have a great arena, and it's a good place The problem of it is, of course, it's a long ways away, so we'll have to see what happens.
We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see what the weather brings. We had a little interesting weather here overnight.
I'll say.
With the freezing rain. It took us a while to chip our cars off the ice. George, again, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure.
Thanks to Jerry Cleveland for joining us, and thanks to all our sponsors, but most of all, thank you for listening to Coach's Corner. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. You've been listening from Bemidji High School Gymnasium. You've been listening to Coach's Corner on K104 and online at rjbroadcasting.com.
This program is brought to you by the Couchiching Area Prevention and Education Coalition. CAPE exists to reduce youth and young adult alcohol and other drug use by promoting safe and healthy choices among all community members.